Welcome back to the Sengoku Archives YouTube channel. I apologize for the hiatus, but we are back! Stay tuned to the end of the episode for some updates for the channel. Now, on to the episode. Ishida Mitsunari is only remembered for his defeat at the Battle of Sekigahara, which took place on October 21st, 1600. Because he stood against Tokugawa Ieyasu, Mitsunari has been viewed as a villain by most historians. Fast forward to the 21st century, where Mitsunari has appeared in Japanese pop culture, which has allowed for some creative liberties for those that tend to follow history more loosely, and you see a shift in how Mitsunari is viewed. Historians have begun to go back to re-examine Ishida Mitsunari to see if he is the villain that historians of the past have claimed for him to be. In this video, we're going to look at two different versions of Mitsunari, as well as Tokugawa Ieyasu, to see how they live up to history, and how it has highlighted the questions that plague us about this era in Japanese history. Note, we will be talking about major plot points of video games in this video. A spoiler alert is now in effect. Sengoku Basara 3 is the third major installment of the video game series produced by Capcom. In this game, Ishida Mitsunari is finally introduced as a playable character, because the game focuses on the Sekigahara campaign. Tokugawa Ieyasu is the only character to have grown up, for he has appeared as Takechio for the previous installments. Because Sengoku Basara loosely follows history, the events that lead to the Battle of Sekigahara in the game are much different than actual historical events. While in the game series it is Akechi Mitsuhide that kills Oda Nobunaga, it's Tokugawa Ieyasu who kills Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Right as Hideyoshi was about to take the land for himself, Ieyasu betrays him and kills him. Mitsunari, who is extremely loyal to the Toyotomi, took his lord's death hard, but what bothered him even more was Ieyasu's betrayal. Serving Hideyoshi was Mitsunari's life, and Ieyasu had taken that all away in the blink of an eye. In Sengoku Basara 3, Ishida Mitsunari has two distinct story modes, one red path and the other blue. In the red path, Mitsunari begins building an army to take on Ieyasu at Sekigahara. He is successful in avenging his lord, however he quickly realizes that this didn't ease his pain. He feels empty as he comes to the realization that his life no longer has meaning. He got the revenge he so desired, but in the end, he lost himself. In the blue path, Mitsunari kills Ieyasu outright, then takes on the generals that would have made up the Eastern Army. His final opponent is Date Masamune, who laughs at the idea that Mitsunari could succeed Hideyoshi, calling him unqualified. Enraged, Mitsunari defeats Masamune, but after this, he has more sense of purpose. He tells Otani Yoshitsugu that he would show those who ever doubted him that he is qualified, and, at the very least, history would be able to say that he was faithful. Tokugawa Ieyasu has 4 different paths, but for this video, we're only going to be looking at the red path, for it is the only one that focuses on the Sekigahara campaign and his relationship with Ishida Mitsunari. While it starts the same as Mitsunari's, Ieyasu's struggles in his story are different than those of Mitsunari. Ieyasu believes in his dream of unification under the Tokugawa banner, but he wants to resolve the problems between him and Mitsunari without it resulting in death. Mogami Yoshiaki finds this to be troublesome, saying that Ieyasu is not being realistic about the situation. Ieyasu believes that he can resolve this without having to kill Mitsunari, but after Yoshiaki leaves him by himself, he stares at the ground in silence, as if he is thinking over Yoshiaki's words. This hesitation to take Mitsunari's life appears before their final fight, and after Ieyasu kills him, he cries while sitting beside the body of a man he once called a friend. Ieyasu and Mitsunari's relationship in the video games is a bit ambiguous. It is understood that they had some sort of relationship, but the video game does not go much deeper. In the anime that follows the game, Sengoku Basara End of Judgement, or Judge End for Western audiences, it dives more into the character's background to reveal why they feel this way towards one another. It comes out that Ieyasu and Mitsunari did have a friendship of sorts, but that was torn apart due to the betrayal. While Sengoku Basara The Last Party also takes place during the Sekigahara campaign, it is lacking in background for both Ieyasu and Mitsunari, leaving a lot of unanswered questions. If you want my opinion on this film, I will put a link in the description for you all to check out. Focusing on their personalities, it is easy to see that Ieyasu and Mitsunari are complete opposites. This is reflected in their respective elements. Ieyasu being light, or the sun, and Mitsunari being darkness, or the moon. This becomes apparent in the video game, for a solar eclipse takes place during Sekigahara, which represents the two armies coming together on the field of battle. These elements represent their personalities as well. Ieyasu is kind and cheerful, believing that the bonds between men is all that is needed to unite Japan and end the wars. Mitsunari, on the other hand, is loyal to a fault, serious, and is easily angered. Ieyasu is seen as a competent leader because he is level-headed. However, he does have moments where he has a lapse of confidence in himself and his abilities. Mitsunari is seen as an incompetent leader because of his tendencies of rage, but he is confident in every action he takes. Mitsunari is confident that he will end Ieyasu's life and get the revenge he so desperately wants. However, this is all Mitsunari wants. His rage blinds him from seeing the bigger picture, thus resulting in a lack of ambition for unity. As for Ieyasu, he tries to win Mitsunari over with talks of unification with bonds, which Mitsunari points out as hypocrisy. The Toyotomi were close to unification, and Ieyasu betrayed them and severed the most important bond that Mitsunari had in his life. While Ieyasu has the ambition for unification, he wants to end the wars without further bloodshed, something that Mitsunari will not accept. When it comes to the Sengoku BASARA franchise, Ishida Mitsunari is seen as a man who is extremely loyal to the Toyotomi and their cause, but it is never stated explicitly why. It is hinted at in End of Judgement that Mitsunari was a nobody until he was discovered by Hideyoshi, and that all he wanted was to be useful in his lord's path of conquest. When Hideyoshi is killed, he becomes lost, and doesn't see much of a clear future past the upcoming battle at Sekigahara. While he might succeed in his revenge, Mitsunari would evidently end up back to where he was before, living in a world without his lord, only this time, his life has no purpose. The second installment of the video game series Samurai Warriors gives us a character roster that extends well beyond the years of Oda Nobunaga's life. Samurai Warriors 2 is a lot like Sengoku BASARA 3 in that their main focus is that of Sekigahara. This is made apparent by the introduction of Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari. Both have become playable characters in this installment. Like their Capcom counterparts, Ieyasu and Mitsunari have conflicting personalities. However, it is harder to pinpoint where their dislike for one another comes from. This is mainly because the game series focuses a lot more on history than Sengoku BASARA, and that the game series leaves out one crucial factor that played into the Sekigahara campaign: the failed war in Korea. In the beginning, Mitsunari seems to be the bad guy once again, especially when he's placed beside Ieyasu, who is portrayed in the most favorable light possible. Stern and ambitious, patient, follows the traditional ways, basically shogun material. Mitsunari is more sarcastic and cynical, arrogant, hard to get along with, yet he is loyal to his lord Hideyoshi. When a player focuses on their individual stories in the game, the more they will better understand these characters. Tokugawa Ieyasu's story is pretty historically accurate. It begins at the Battle of Anegawa in 1570 and ends with the Tokugawa unification of the land. It's clear in the beginning that Ieyasu has plans for unification, but he is biding his time, serving under Oda Nobunaga as a means of gaining power and stability. However, much like his Basara counterpart, Ieyasu suffers a defeat at the hands of Takeda Shingen, which helps him realize the path he needs to take. The story ends at the Battle of Sekigahara, victorious, and finally able to bring peace to Japan. Considering how close his story follows his actual history, Ieyasu's in-game story tends to fall flat when compared to other characters in the game. As for Ishida Mitsunari, his story begins at the Battle of Yamazaki, serving Toyotomi Hideyoshi loyally. The setup for the Sekigahara campaign happens early on when Mitsunari meets Naoe Kanetsugu and Sanada Yukimura before the siege of Odawara. The three men swear an oath in the name of honor, almost mirroring the Peach Garden Oath from Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Not only that, but it shows the three major generals of the Western Army during Sekigahara. Mitsunari at Sekigahara proper, Yukimura at Ueda, and Kanetsugu in the north. Going against history, all three men are victorious, and Mitsunari finally learns the meaning of honor, justice, and love. Since the political aspects of the era and the Korean campaigns have been left out of the game, it is hard to understand why Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari hate one another. However, there is one clue that the game gives us. Ieyasu tries to take control of the country after Hideyoshi's death, but Mitsunari believes that he is the one to carry on Hideyoshi's legacy. Both were close to Hideyoshi and thus believed that they had what it took to carry on his dream. While Mitsunari's ideals are closer to Hideyoshi's dream, in the end, it is Ieyasu's ideals that win the day and the war. While the Korean campaigns are still not being included in the newest installments of Samurai Warriors, the political problems are being brought into the latest installments and even into the animated series that follows the events of Sengoku Musu 4, or Samurai Warriors 4 in the West. Perhaps in future installments we might see the Korean campaign, for those events will help players understand character stances during the Sekigahara campaign. Looking at the two most popular examples of both Ishida Mitsunari and Tokugawa Ieyasu in Japanese pop culture today, it does make one re-examine both the historical figures, but it also gives us more unanswered questions. As we know, historically, Mitsunari and Ieyasu did not like one another, a dislike that went as far back as the Korean campaigns. Even further back was the bad blood that was between Ieyasu and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Ieyasu wanted to rule Japan, and he did so by going against Hideyoshi's last wishes, which Mitsunari called him out on. The question is why? Why did it matter to Mitsunari that Ieyasu was taking over? Sadly, especially in Western history books written on samurai, Mitsunari is not even mentioned. When he is, Mitsunari is seen as the villain, the man standing in the way of peace. There is also the fact that Ieyasu is more well known, mainly for his role of being the last of the three unifiers of Japan and the founder of the Tokugawa shogunate. This also leads to the famous "it's the victors who write history" trope. The Tokugawa era, or the Edo period, followed after Sekigahara, bringing over 200 years of peace to Japan. This might keep historians from viewing Ieyasu differently, considering what followed Sekigahara. Viewing Ieyasu as the hero can be seen in pop culture references mentioned in this video. He's the ray of hope, a true samurai, the perfect man to unite Japan. By contrast, Mitsunari has a couple strikes against him historically. Contrary to his pop culture reincarnations, Mitsunari was not a samurai in the traditional sense, but a politician, something that was not looked upon favorably. He also had little combat experience, which made him look like a weak commander of troops, especially in the eyes of samurai, who were battle-hardened from years of war. Lastly, he lost. Since Ieyasu is so heavily focused on, especially by Western historians, we are left to speculate Mitsunari's motives. Looking at pop culture, we might be able to figure out what that is. In both examples of Ishida Mitsunari shown in this video, they have completely different approaches. Capcom makes it look like they're painting him out to be the villain of the game. From his personality, to his attire, to his looks, it seems to point to a vilified Mitsunari. Once one digs down deeper into the game, it is revealed that he is far from a villain. He is a man trying to avenge his murdered lord, who was killed by a man he once called an ally. Mitsunari wanted to be a useful member in the world Hideyoshi wanted to create, but after Hideyoshi's death, Mitsunari had no purpose. All in all, Capcom's version of Ishida Mitsunari is that of a loyal soldier who has lost the will to live. As for Koei's version of Mitsunari, they automatically paint him out to be the tragic hero of the era. While sarcastic and blunt, he is loyal and he does his best to serve his lord and to keep Hideyoshi's legacy alive after his passing. Mitsunari does his best to keep the Toyotomi name alive through him and follows the saying that is his clan's mon, Daiichi, Daimon, Daikichi, which in at least one translation is all for one for all, and may heaven bless the land. He follows this in order to keep Hideyoshi's dream alive. Due to the game's following history, however, Mitsunari fails to do so in the Samurai Warriors franchise. Ishida Mitsunari's rise to popularity in 21st century entertainment in Japan has made historians revisit how he's viewed today. As has been stated before, Mitsunari has been viewed as the villain, mainly due to the fact that he lost one of the greatest battles in Japanese history, while Ieyasu went on to establish 265 years of peace and prosperity to Japan. Looking at the actions of these men leading up to the famous battle, we begin to see how Ieyasu began to sow the seeds for a Tokugawa unification. When Hideyoshi died, 10 men, 5 regional lords, and 5 administrators were to manage the Toyotomi peace until Hideyoshi's son, Hideyori, became of age. Due to the untrusting atmosphere of the era, almost instantly after Hideyoshi's death, dead people began conspiring to take over the Toyotomi. Ieyasu began taking over the Toyotomi affairs early on, and even took it one step further by appointing himself as Hideyori's godfather after the original godfather, Maeda Toshie, passed away in 1599. After that, he moved into Osaka Castle, the seat of Toyotomi power. This was the last straw for Mitsunari, and he sent Ieyasu a letter of charges against him. Despite the charges being true, Ieyasu saw this as a declaration of war, and thus began the road to Sekigahara. With the events of history, it can be concluded that Tokugawa Ieyasu was the real villain at Sekigahara, for he betrayed the wishes of his former lord, and that Ishida Mitsunari is the tragic hero, the one who tried to save the Toyotomi clan. Despite this, there are a couple of things that keep Mitsunari as the villain. There is uncertainty behind Mitsunari's actions. While historians know the reasons behind Ieyasu's actions, they are not clear on Mitsunari's. A couple of questions remain. Why was Mitsunari loyal to the Toyotomi in the first place? Did he have his own ambitions like Ieyasu, or was he just loyal to a fault? Or is there something else that historians are missing? We will most likely never have the answers to these questions, only allowing speculations. Then there is also Ieyasu's legacy. The Tokugawa era, which spanned from 1603 to 1868, is seen as one of Japan's golden ages, and the family is still held in high regard by the Japanese to this day. It is hard to change him into a traitor after hundreds of years of being seen as the great unifier. The roles that these men were given will forever be cemented by history. Ishida Mitsunari is a historical figure that does not get much recognition outside of Japan, but he is an important figure in Japanese history that should not be overlooked, regardless on how he is viewed. He managed to keep the Toyotomi afloat for a time, and, before the betrayal of Kobayakawa Hideaki, was winning at the Battle of Sekigahara. While historians may never give him the credit he deserves, he does earn a place in history as the commander of the Western Army at Japan's largest battle, and that should count for something. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, thank you all for being so patient with me as I've tried to figure out how to go about everything that is attached to Sengoku Archives. A few things have changed since my last video in June. First off, if you like podcasts and want to listen to the Sengoku Archives outside of YouTube, check out the Sengoku Archives podcast. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and more. Check us out on our Anchor page, which will be in the description below. Episodes will be uploaded every 2 weeks. We also have merch! Thanks to the awesome people at Spreadshirt, the Sengoku Archives now has a merch shop. Listed on your screen are the sale dates for the rest of November, including a Black Friday sale. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates on sales or free shipping days. All sales help support the Sengoku Archives on all platforms. Stay in the loop by following us on Facebook and Twitter. I post updates for the website, podcast, YouTube channel, and about the historical fiction book that is in the works as well. Links will be in the description as well as on our channel page. I will be back in February 2022 for a new episode for YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Until then, take care and happy holidays.